So, Professor Fukuyama, dear Frank, thank you for your time and for talking to our readers.
Sure.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to hear all the different and not so different viewpoints on liberalism. But what I was lacking a bit was, do the liberal forces in America see the role of Russia, the hand of Russia, the hand of Putin in all of this?
Well, I think that many people in America do see the hand of Russia. The trouble is that there's a couple of other groups that have a different attitude towards Russia. So on the extreme right, you actually get MAGA Republicans that are actually sympathetic to Russia. For some reason, they think that Russia is a Christian country and that liberals are anti-Christian, and Russia is a big bulwark against this kind of creeping liberalism, against LGBTQ ideology, and so forth. But then there's probably a more influential group that I would label as realists. John Mearsheimer, Professor John Mearsheimer is an example of this.
Know his work, yeah.
Yeah, and they're not sympathetic to Russia, but they have this view that all countries pursue national interest, and that Russia and the United States in that respect are not all that different, and that Russia felt threatened by NATO expansion, and the United States was not careful to respect Russian interests and their sphere of interest, and that's why they invaded Ukraine. And therefore, we shouldn't spend a lot of time and effort trying to help the Ukrainians defeat Russia, because it's just not a realistic way of using our resources.
That's not true, actually, because the NATO expansion is actually a child of Russian aggression.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, you and I understand that.
Yeah.
But
well, the strife or the polarization of the societies in general is terrible. And I think Russia has always been very apt at, finding the rifts, finding the ley lines, finding everything that may tear people apart and exploiting it. I think it goes back even to the Tsarist police, the active measures, активные мероприятия, they call it in Russian. And they are still doing it. In fact, it might be the only thing they do very efficiently. So what do you think we should counter it with? Some positive framework, as it was very eloquently put by Sabina, for example, or something else?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. I think that we could try to undermine the Russian regime by doing what they do, false narratives and, trying to poison, the minds of ordinary Russians against their own leaders and this sort of thing. We typically have not, in most democratic countries, chosen to do that because we feel that that's too manipulative. But maybe, that would be an appropriate response, under current circumstances. I think that being a democratic country devoted to free speech, as most European countries are, in the United States in theory, I think that we have to resort to other means, which is basically to try to warn people, to inform people about the tactics that are being used, and then to expose, Russian interference.
Yeah, are we doing that enough? Even here
not,
on this floor,
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about Russia, I must tell you. In the context of the meeting, of course, but also in the context of long-term relationship, because I fear that Americans don't see their own interests in this, because it's an American interest, to be proactive against Russia. And Ronald Reagan knew that, and in the Eastern Europe we are forever thankful to the United States for helping us out of that pickle. Pickle is a very small word for very great.
Well, yeah. So there's a couple of different audiences for these kinds of messages. I think that, one big problem when Biden was president was that he understood that Russia is a malevolent actor, but I think that he was overly risk averse. He actually was convinced that the Russians might consider using nuclear weapons or escalating if the United States appeared to be too aggressive in support of Ukraine, and therefore he held back in giving them kinds of weapons that they could have used to really defeat the Russians. And so that's one problem. Today you've got a completely different problem where you actually have a president who seems to be sympathetic to Russia. We have a president who's completely bought all of these Russian narratives. He claims that Ukraine started the war, the full-scale war. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But somehow Putin has he believes Putin where he doesn't believe Russia experts in his own government. What do you do about that? The man was elected, and it's very hard to, counter it. And I've found that, personally, when Biden was president, I and other people kept lobbying for more weapons to Ukraine, but that's not going to work right now because you have a president that's not going to listen to that kind of a message.
What is he responding to? Because I don't know. Is there a deep trauma in him that he is either a bully or bullied by Putin? Because I fear he is bullied and manipulated. Putin is a gangster. Putin is someone who kills people, and I think opposite to him, Trump. Well, he wants to be a gangster.
Yeah,
but
he admires Putin. He
so
admires
is it that?
Putin and wishes that he had the power to do the things that Putin does. I think that the only real check against Trump right now is his vanity, that he wants to win a Nobel Prize, a Nobel Peace Prize. He's really extremely jealous of Obama, who actually won one.
It's a complex.
At the moment, or he seems to see Putin as someone standing in the way of his getting a peace agreement, and therefore,
could that be exploited? Well, this is not a nice word, but could that be used for good purposes?
Well, maybe. I mean, I think that's really the main hope, that Trump's vanity is such that he can be convinced that Russia is really the obstacle to a peace agreement, and therefore they need to put more pressure on Russia. Whether that's going to be sufficient to counter the things he's going to hear from Putin when they talk one-on-one, I don't know.
Yeah, and there's one thing Europe should do more. That's one thing I agree on with Trump. I'm sorry, but I think he was right, and that Europe should pull its own weight. And, it hasn't happened. But I find it hard to ignore one thing, that Germany was actively discouraged from any militarization and from taking a stand on its own security matters and military matters. France too, for obvious reasons, so that Europe was seen as a hotbed for conflicts. So how do we acknowledge this and make a better future, make some better vision for the future of strong, maybe militarized Europe?
Well, I think that there's no easy answer, but you have to keep reminding Europeans of the threat that they face, that it's not simply Ukraine, it's their freedom as well. Right now Russia is waging a hybrid war against all of the countries in Europe. They have agents and influencers and all sorts of people that are trying to shift the politics of every single European country. I think in terms of Germany, the problem is really, in a way, the German people, because after the Second World War, they did a lot to try to convince their young people that, Germany was the cause of the Second World War, of the Holocaust, that they have to abandon that militaristic, path that they were on, and that worked too well. So now, when they actually do need to militarize, they're not willing to do that. But I think that's a battle that can be won. I mean, already I think you've seen big changes in public opinion in Germany, and that's going to continue.
It's turning around the big tanker.
Yeah, it's very hard to convince a whole generation of people that the situation is different, but I think it's something that can be done.
I hope so. Thank you so much.